Hello and welcome to Making Media Now, the Filmmakers Collaborative podcast. I'm your host, Michael Acevedo. My guest on this episode is Daniel Masciari, who joins me to discuss Stationed at Home, his debut feature film. Set on a clear and frigid Christmas Eve in 1998 in a small, forgotten city, Stationed at Home tells the tale of a solitary taxi driver on the graveyard shift, breathlessly awaiting the sight of the International Space Station. As the hours count down, a parade of offbeat misfits derail his plans, propelling the story to its exhilarating climax. Here's the trailer.
The exact time that the International Space Station will be flying over our humble little town is 5:47 this morning. That's 5:47 a.m. And on Christmas, no less.
Just a coffee and a scratch-off. Oh. That should be it.
You the cab driver?
Now you come with us. We need you on Mars.
Ralph?
We'll get you home by 5, you filthy dog.
You think a tiny little human went all the way to the moon? What? I'm Jack. Probably some kind of serial killer. Is Ralph still driving? You can tell him it's Harry.
71. We're gonna need you for one more.
You sure it's the last one?
When I give him my word, I keep it. Usually. If he thinks he can make you work like a dog, you gotta have a trick. Ralph!
What am I smelling?
Who the hell is this cab? Help me here. Ralph's different. Is that a cop? I think that's a cop. Step on it, Ralph! There we go.
You here for the night or something?
Yes, one night.
Just a reminder that the International Space Station will be flying overhead at 5:47 this morning. That's 5:47 a.m.
Before I go, you never know. Ralph was lucky.
Who's Ralph?
He's a cab driver. Merry Christmas.
She'll see it too. I know it.
Stationed at Home is now available on all cable, satellite, and digital platforms in North America. The son of an Italian immigrant, Daniel Masciari grew up outside of Boston in a neighborhood of new arrivals to America from all over the world, a community that nurtured his imagination and fueled his sense of humor. Fascinated by film's unique ability to tell stories earnestly and intimately, Daniel began shooting and directing his friends at age 11, using a camera his parents had given him. By age 22, Variety selected him as one of 110 students who represent the future of film, media, and entertainment. By 24, he had already edited his first feature film, which was profiled in Filmmaker magazine. Making Media Now is sponsored by Filmmakers Collaborative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting media makers from across the creative spectrum. From providing fiscal sponsorship to presenting an array of informative and educational programs, Filmmakers Collaborative supports creatives at every step in their journey. To learn more, visit filmmakerscollab.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please do like, share, follow, leave a review. Now on to my conversation with Daniel Masciari. Daniel Masciari, welcome to Making Media Now.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. I really appreciate being here.
It's a pleasure. We're here to talk about your feature debut called Stationed at Home, which is just I got to throw a lot of adjectives at it. It's enchanting. It's weird. it's certainly thought provoking, and it's certainly offbeat. And we'll get into the details of that film in a minute. But why don't you just kind of set up the plot for it, because it's kind of a wide ranging plot.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it is it's about a cab driver, a lone cab driver
Yeah.
in 1998, waiting to see the first pass of the International Space Station in Binghamton, New York. It's
Yeah.
this like forgotten city where it's very empty, very desolate. Yet it's very beautiful. It's a black and white film, and he gets taken on this journey, this wacky journey with these misfit strangers, these passengers of his, and they take him throughout Binghamton on this very unexpected evening on Christmas Eve.
And
And
it's
um,
yeah.
and so it's a film about, I would say, like finding home in the universe.
Yeah, Christmas Eve, where we're all sort of peaked to expect a little bit of magic to possibly happen,
Yeah.
that comes through in your film. Um, Talk to me about the decision to shoot it in black and white. It's beautifully shot. You want to give a shout out to your cinematographer?
Oh, that was the next thing I was going to do. Yeah, shout out to Jackson Jarvis. He was with me from the very get-go, right when I had the first draft of the script. And I had always imagined it in black and white, and I
Interesting.
was very, very happy that when he read the script, he thought the same thing. Something about the city of Binghamton when we were scouting. There's so many textures,
Yeah,
and those textures really come about, I think, more in black and white. Especially it's all at night, the film. And so, yeah, there's something about the cold of the film, the winter, where the black and white can really elevate that. And also, just from another perspective, I think it takes away a lot of information, to color information. So it makes the audience, I guess, dream a bit more and kind of go into these strangers with these odd quirks and subtleties. So.
I thought the black and white also lended a particular air given the Christmas Eve setting, and maybe just because it touches upon, in our memory banks, a lot of those classic black and white movies that we tend to associate with, being at home with some family and friends on Christmas Eve, and and kind of in the Christmas Eve genre of films. You've got this collection of sort of misfits and folks that would otherwise maybe be alone on Christmas Eve. So the black and white really, I think, tapped into there's a certain solitary nature to the characters, even though that they do form this merry band of pranksters.
Yeah. I think there was always this. I love that used the word loneliness or solitude. I think you
Yeah,
used, and yeah, I think I always thought about the film as this. There was the city of Binghamton is its own solitary character, and then you have Ralph, who's this solitary cab driver, and then you have these characters that kind of disrupt that. And
yeah.
so there's black and white just always felt to fit the spirit of the film and I think too it's hard to sometimes give a fully perfect answer for people, but I think it felt right to me to.
When you're shooting in black and white and you're collaborating with your cinematographer, do you run into particular limits as a director that or considerations that you may not run into if you were shooting in, sort of the full spectrum of color?
That's a great question. I mean, it's funny because for me, I actually felt it more freeing in a
Okay.
way, especially on a limited budget. You really, and again, it wasn't by design, like, oh, we're shooting on black and white because of a limited budget. It
Yep.
just happened to be that way. But basically, you kind of are a little more free to focus on textures rather than balancing, different colors working exactly. It's more about textures. So I think Jackson and I felt very free planning the script or plan that, and then also planning the shot list
Yep.
specifically. It was just like it was much more freeing to know that if you get the edge of that wall, it'll still look interesting.
Yes.
So we were just totally in sync. Yeah, Jackson is just an absolute wizard, and he was just such a joy to work with. Midwestern guy, so very nice. One of my
And
best friends too.
and as you mentioned, the film is set just over one Christmas Eve, so one night. But how many nights were you actually shooting on?
15 nights.
15. Okay.
Yeah,
And you were
yeah.
always shooting at night.
Always at night, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Yep, stayed at the Comfort Inn in Binghamton, New York, and strolled out, when everyone was getting ready to wrap their days up. And yeah, it was all 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. pretty much every time.
And
So
what had been your experience with Binghamton when, when the need for a desolate post-industrial late 80s setting came to mind? Why Binghamton?
yeah, so I was living in New York. I've been working as an editor for like 10 years now.
Yeah.
And but at the time I was living in New York and I was visiting Ithaca, New York. And we stopped in Binghamton a cold winter night and I stepped out to stretch my legs. I was listening to the song Dusk by Duke Ellington.
Okay.
I was just like it was something very mesmerizing.
Yeah.
Um, and and then when I stepped outside, I saw this like abandoned building on a train track. It was this like massive building. It was cold, it was quiet. And something about that with this music, it just gave me this idea for a film. And then I imagined Eric Bjarnar, a friend of mine I've made a bunch of short films with. He plays the cab driver. I imagine him driving cab, and he used to drive cab as well. So like, of course, I was like working off of reality there. And he has a love of space. I'm like, wait a second, I want to like this just feels right. Something about him driving alone in Binghamton in this empty city, at least from my perspective at the time, just felt very magical to me. It felt very warm but cold at the same time.
Yeah.
And so that was really the initial spark. Was just it's kind of, and it wasn't even like I was seeing the cab. I was sort of like hearing it and seeing like a faint image, like a little figure in the distance around across the bridge. And so that bridge also in the film was this like this base point for me and Jackson when we were scouting. It was
Okay.
this like little hidden area called Depot Street. It's like
Yeah.
this little patch where you could really see this arc of the bridge. And
It's a
it
great
was always like
shot.
it was our base. It was sort of like our what we call sort of like our iconic shot of the film.
Yeah, no, it's a great shot. It really captures so much. So this idea comes to mind for you, and as someone with this film, you wrote it, you edited it, you directed it. Um, which of your kind of like creative lights go off first? Do you begin thinking of this idea as a writer and give yourself the task of, well, let me come up with a treatment, let me come up with a story, or do you just go right in and start creating characters?
I love that question because I think everyone has a different process. For me, it really starts with that initial sort of feeling.
Hmm.
Like that to me is sort of like the source of it. And I always carry around this notebook. And so basically, because then you might get another idea and you write it down. And so I just collected things that felt that they were connected. And then eventually it got to a point where I had, a beginning. And then where's that going? And then who else is in this city? And I have to say too, the actors in the film, I wrote it for like 75% of the actors. They all
Oh,
studied at the same Meisner training school, Actors Workshop of Ithaca. And all those people on the poster were trained by Eliza, who plays Elaine. And so it was really a existential process of writing for people that I really knew would be perfect. And they're just great actors, and their chemistry also is super important.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and where in your process does that kind of list of disparate ideas or notions begin to form a script?
So I have a three-pronged process. So basically, it all starts in the notebook. And then what I do is I transcribe those ideas,
Hmm.
just literal transcription. It's just boring work. I transcribe them into a text edit document. And then as I'm transcribing them, it starts to expand.
Yep.
And then basically it's like, and you're not like choosing that, right? Like it's just like, oh, well, if you write this, you want to write this, and then you get, oh, wait, this look or something like that. And then it goes into the script. And then you have the beginning, and then it's this like factory system
Yeah.
where it goes like notebook, text edit, script. And then eventually, once you have like 50 pages, you're just kind of in the script and maybe the notebook as well. And then it's just those two, and the sort of transcription goes away a bit. So it's sort of like a factory system. At least that's how I work. I couldn't sit down and just like summon something. It has to be something that I am motivated by, like a feeling.
Yeah, it's almost like you've assigned yourself these prompts in advance and start piecing them together. What's the relationship between each of them? One
Exactly.
question I always like to ask folks about their writing process in particular is how committed to you are you to like a time of day and an area in wherever you do your writing? Does that matter to you?
It sort of does. I like writing from home,
Hmm.
generally. But I will say too, it's like you have to you also have to like sometimes hearing yourself say things to people is helpful because you can see if something clicks.
Sure. Yeah.
And so for me, it was really helpful to have collaborators where like if I'm stuck or if I'm just like talking about it, I'll get an idea because we're talking and then it's like boom, that goes in.
Yeah.
So it's I think that and then also like the script evolves as I mean all the way through the editing process.
Hmm.
I mean I truly believe that the you know and I will say too, as a strong editing background, I wrote the film almost as if I knew how it was going to be edited, but of course that will be adjusted because you want an open mind. But I think though this film in particular is so much about the subtlety of the
Hmm.
characters and the looks and what they're thinking but not saying, and so I really wrote in a lot of these specific details, these gestures.
Yeah. 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 You actually you set the bar pretty high for yourself too, as an editor, I would have to say, particularly with the last, oh, I don't know, 20 minutes or so of the film. There's a lot of edits and the story fragments kind of build to this crescendo of reveal. And I was just imagining how exhilarating slash exhausting that process must have been.
So that yeah, I guess we can say without giving too many spoilers, there is a cop chase,
Yeah.
and so that was actually one of the few parts. If I think that may have been the only part
It's kind of a
that
hilarious car chase, I have to say, around a rotary multiple times.
but yeah, no, that cop chase was actually one of the few places, and I think the only place that Jackson and I actually did a storyboard of sorts,
I would
because
imagine.
everything else was shot lists.
Okay.
But yeah, the that writing that part was a lot of fun because I got in contact with Gaucho, the band who plays that gypsy jazz music,
Yeah.
and they were really into it, into the script and everything. And then so I knew this music we were going to use, and
Hmm.
so that's super helpful because we really wanted this comical music of sorts to
Right.
sort of work with the like the objects of Ralph's cab and then like just the absurdity of all that to kind of come about.
Yes.
So it was but yes, it was very well, it was very planned. I mean, everything has to be planned in a film. And Jackson and I just love planning so that the actors feel, kind of like safe, like they know we're going to get what we
They
need.
are in good hands. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So before we hit record, you and I were just kind of talking about the fact that you are born and raised in the Boston area. You're in upstate New York right now. But let's talk about your formative years a little bit. Can you remember the first movie that you saw that made you think, I want to do that?
That's a great question. There are a couple. My parents actually, it was their first date, and I remember seeing it when I was like six, The Elephant Man.
Oh yeah, John Hurt.
So, yeah.
David,
So,
that was David Lynch directed
yeah.
that.
Yep. Yep. And so that film definitely affected me. It's not
How
like
old
I
were
remember
you?
it like six or something.
Okay.
And it was, they saw it on their first date like years before that. And so that had a big effect on me. Anything by Hitchcock too. I remember when I was a little kid, 10, 11 years old, I would bike to the library in my town and pick up all these Hitchcock DVDs.
And
And I would,
Elephant Man also was black and white.
black and white. Yeah. I think these like black and white films just, I don't know, they're so cozy to me.
Yeah,
And I don't know if you feel this way, but I don't know, I feel like films that you love, sometimes you don't remember exactly what happened. You sort of just remember how they made you feel.
yeah,
And so I have this like radical view. People will probably disagree with me on this, but like the plot and the story of a film for me is to serve that mood or that like sort of feeling that you're trying to get. It's like crazy idea, like because obviously people love plot and I do too, but I think that feeling that we remember from films, like let's take Rear Window or
sure,
for example, it's like that film. I saw that when I was really young, and I can't tell you exactly what happens because not like a lot happens, but
sure.
I remember just that feeling of being in with him, in the window looking out.
Well, that does seem to be almost, and that would probably differentiate maybe a playwright from someone who's writing screenplays and then directing, making a film of their own screenplay, in the sense that a particular feeling, maybe not feeling devoid of, plot and character
Mhm.
development and whatnot, but a feeling is necessary. I mean, personally, some of my favorite directors, when I think of their films, as you said, I think first and foremost about the feeling they're creating, whether it's sort of that, kinetic energy of a Scorsese film where everything just feels propulsive all the time, in his amazing work with soundtracks, or something more like the poetic meanderings of a Terrence Malick film. Right.
Right.
And try explaining the plot of a Terrence Malick film to
Right.
somebody who's never
It's kind
seen
of
one.
it's kind of difficult to explain the plot of Tree of Life for sure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you're growing up, you see the Elephant Man in the Belmont area. Did you grow up in a home that wherein film mattered? Like people wanted to talk about film and film slash movies. Is it too highfalutin to say film? Um, but
No, I
were you
yeah.
getting positive feedback, I guess, for this nascent interest?
Yeah, so my is interesting. My dad's from Southern Italy.
Huh?
And so like I grew up watching soccer, for example. I never felt like totally I still don't know the rules of American football. And my friends have been trying to teach me for like decades. But basically, yeah, my parents they're not like educated in film or anything like that, but
Okay.
they were really into like odd films that you'd see at like an independent theater.
Sure.
And so for me, I like grew up just being like, oh yeah, like why not see Down by Law by Jim Jarmusch? You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like that was just like on the DVD rack.
I got a Jarmish feel from your movie.
A lot of people say that. Yeah, it's
Yes,
like
I was
to me
thinking
it's like
cigarettes and coffee.
to me it's like way too flattering. Like to be like another reviewer compared this to like Taste of Cherry or something by Kiarostami. I'm like
That I don't
I'm
know.
not, that's a huge compliment. But basically, yeah, I think and then my parents gave me this little Canon ZR 300 camera growing up. This little tape recorder made some terrible films with my friends. I remember one day my friends just weren't doing exactly what I said because they wanted to like do other things besides make a film, and I just got the camera and I just smashed it. I was just like, "Oh my God, like can we just make this film?" So yeah, I there were definitely some bumps in there
Yeah.
because I was just like I knew like because you need to like I think go through those headaches of being like why can't this just be made the way I want it to be made before
Said
do it.
every director ever.
Yeah. So it's like so yeah, my parents were again there was no like plan for me. There was no like hey you're gonna go do this. Like at one point I wanted to go to Southern Italy and become like a butcher. So I guess I sort of applied that by becoming an editor.
Yeah, sure.
But so but it's basically yeah. Anyways, yeah, my parents were very supportive of
Did
whatever I
you
yeah.
did you go to film school? Did you study film as an undergrad?
Yeah, I went to Ithaca College
Okay.
for film.
All right.
Yep.
And you said you've done a lot of work as an editor. You have a resume, impressive resume on films that you have edited. Uh, did your work as an editor, did you feel like, that's sort of my calling, or did becoming an editor feel like it's going to get me close enough to, working within the film industry, and then I'll move on to be a writer director?
I mean, I never really saw it as different than just making films because to me, editing is sort of the part of making a film that separates it from other art forms. That's
Yes,
how I've always thought about it.
absolutely.
I've always thought, because film you have cinematography. I mean, I guess again, I'm stretching this idea, but it comes from photography. You have music that comes from music. You have acting that comes from plays, from theater. But editing is like this one piece of filmmaking that I don't, you can go back to like Japanese hieroglyphs where they put images together to create a third meaning. But but ultimately though, editing to me is sort of like the thing that makes the film a film, the
Hmm.
process that makes a film a film. It's like when you have all the ingredients, but if you don't cook it correctly or cook it right, it won't come together. So, that's how I've always thought about editing. So films that I've collaborated on as an editor, it always just felt like I was applying, a certain kind of headspace to that.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned a little bit earlier too, with Stationed at Home, because of your experience as an editor, you were sort of able to see the entire film as you wanted to edit it while you were shooting it. Did you what amount of surprise occurred to you in the editing room? Maybe instances where you thought, I thought I wanted to do this with this scene, but now that I see it, I think I want to do that.
Yeah, I think again, I think you have to be like sort of both warm and cold when you're editing
Hmm.
because you want to be you want to be cold to be able to see what it is,
Hmm.
but you want to be warm to retain the initial sort of thread that you're trying to communicate. So I always thought of it as, okay, I know the anchor points that I need, right? Like those anchor points should be served.
Yes.
And you might find a better one, or, it might be a little different than what you thought. But ultimately, editing is being able to look at all the material and figure out what the best assembly is
Hmm.
of the film. So, yeah, it wasn't that challenging. I mean, obviously in retrospect, it's easy to say it wasn't challenging, but I had a really good team around me. So like I could send cuts to them and like I had, between Jackson, our cinematographer, Eliza, our producer, Bethany, our producer, like I could send these cuts out and just get feedback. So it was almost, so anytime I felt a little too close to it, they'd look at it. And
Hmm.
then when I've had like a week or two go by, I'm a little more fresh at that point.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was like stuck in a vacuum. I had some good fresh points of view to and to be, and then people who didn't know anything about the film, I would send cuts to for months, to make sure. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had a pre-existing relationship with a number of the actors.
Yeah.
So I imagine that that made the casting process a little bit easier for you.
Super easy. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was I just imagined them as these roles, and
Had you
I know how
directed them before in anything?
um a couple of them actually in some short films.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And actually now that I'm looking at this poster behind me, most of them actually. Yeah. So but no, it's just doing the Meisner technique, which is a whole other conversation, but I could
Give our
talk about
listeners
it.
a thumbnail sketch of what the Meisner technique is.
Yeah. So the Meisner technique, it's an acting technique that's based off of, and Eliza would be able to talk way more about this because she's taught it for like 20 years. I did a little bit of teaching with her, but I'm not what she is when it comes to that. But basically, it's essentially this technique that's based off of, getting out of your head and reacting to not just your partner, but the environment that you're in. And so it's a very scary technique because it's forcing you to be incredibly like purely honest about what you're feeling and what you're noticing in the moment, every moment. And so when you do this repetition technique, like if I were doing it with you, although it's hard to do over Zoom, I might say like, you smiled, and then you go, I smiled, you smiled. That's what you sort of start out with. And then I might go to judgments and then say, you squinted your eyes, and then I might interpret that, even though I don't think that now, I might say like you're dubious or something like that.
Okay.
And then it's like you smile, you laughed, things like that. So you
So it
sort of,
distinguishes itself from like the Stanislavski method, which draws on sense memory of the individual. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's more feeding off the context of
yes.
what's happening in the story or the scene.
Exactly. And that's why it's so good for film, because the camera picks up everything.
Yeah.
So you can see, especially with actors that are trained in this, how they're reacting to their partners really well.
Yep.
So, or the people they're with. And so it allows for this really subtle communication, which for film is beautiful.
What was your location scouting process like? Because
Yeah.
there are a number of locations in the film, and I was wondering, like, was that actually a convenience store? Was that an actual bar? Was that an actual strip joint that you were at?
Everything basically was real.
And was that
Yeah.
the name of the strip joint?
No, that was a composite.
Okay.
But yeah, the no, the real strip joint should maybe go unnamed. I'm not sure if they want to
Well,
talk about
yeah.
that.
The name of the film is way too subtle for a strip joint.
Yeah. But no, it was all on location essentially.
Mhm.
If you're curious, I can tell you what wasn't. But basically, the the locations in Binghamton, I mean, one, again, there's so much to talk about. It's 'cause it's so much praise to give people. But our film was a catalyst in establishing the Binghamton Film Office
Oh,
in
wow.
Binghamton. And so that to me was super cool because then they were working with us to find locations.
Yeah.
So a number of these locations with Lewis Newman, who runs the film office there, like the convenience store, like I needed a convenience store, that could be open all night. And he's just like, I know the guy, and I mean, some of these locations we had to insist they get paid because they're so welcoming and so nice. I'm like, no, no, like you need to get like something, like we're using your energy, everything. So it was honestly like a canvas. We had total free reign. The permitting, everything was super easy. They could shut the streets down. It was awesome. Yeah, it couldn't have been a better place to shoot this film.
And I know that your film is going to be released on November 11th on video on demand. I talk to so many filmmakers, and one of the biggest hurdles we discuss is distribution.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about the process for you finding a distributor.
Yeah, so basically, you start out with festivals,
Yep.
and uh, again, I'm starting to think that festivals are actually part of distribution
Hmm.
because you're starting to release your film.
Yep.
And so we got into the Glasgow Film Festival in Scotland for our world premiere, and we were
Yep.
so excited. It's this BAFTA qualifying festival. They really bring amazing films there, and to be a part of that was, for us, like creating this film out of absolute nowhere. Like we just like, let's make this film. We got a lot of people involved to make it happen. We're just like, let's get this into the world, and Glasgow welcomed us. Then we did the Brooklyn Film Festival for our US premiere. And but then we got an offer from a couple places through our sales agent, and our sales, that's one thing you want to have as a sales agent to basically foster that
Yep.
process.
Yep.
Because distributors might not take a call from a filmmaker, you know what I mean? Because it's like not necessarily the right approach. So
Sure.
so then we got in touch with Freestyle Digital Media that made us a really awesome wide distribution offer, and and it's really great. So yeah, we're going to be released on November 11th on video on demand, cable, satellite, etc., across North America.
That's
So.
great. Yeah, a lot of opportunities for folks to see it. Lately, also, I've been asking filmmakers about how large either a threat or a benefit they're feeling like the encroachment of AI on the filmmaking process is. Has that consumed any bandwidth in your thinking?
Not really. I mean, if people want to watch like terrible things, it's their choice. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I don't see how, because I don't know. I see filmmaking and art as essentially reacting off of experience and then bringing, like, so when you're, for example, like if you're writing a script, it's not just what's on the page, you're imagining something to be
Sure.
on that page.
Yeah.
So I don't know if AI is like imagining something
Right.
outside. Like the whole point of the script is it goes there and then it comes back out. Like,
Yeah.
so,
And it's filtered through the interpretation and the personification of an actor.
yeah, exactly. And so it's like, I mean, I understand there's like people will counter argue with that idea, but I think, I don't know. I personally, I just, that's not art. I mean, that it's not art to like just generate it through a computer. I mean, that I don't see that.
And what about as an editor? Have you found yourself using any AI tools that just sort of speed up the process while not eliminating the human component?
Yeah, I mean, certain things like syncing footage,
Yeah.
basically that's been around for a while. I mean, sort of automated processes. Um, but yeah, I mean, AI, I think, will be a helpful tool for, people that are trying to make a certain technical part of the process simpler. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean,
Right.
like that, especially if it has to do with like audio cleanup or things of that nature, where why wouldn't we want that,
Right.
But when it comes to, I mean, yeah, basically things that humans can't do, I
Right.
think that's great. But when it comes to art, though, I mean, you need human experience in order um, to create it.
Yeah. I think you said that you shot 15 or 16 nights.
15, yeah.
Yeah. And what was your entire kind of production timeline from pre-production to, final cut?
Yeah. So pre-production, we started in, I guess it would have been November of 2022, was when we started like locking everything down and making sure we were good to go. And then we shot in February of 2023. So then that was 15 days then. And then editing it and getting it through post-production, visual effects, everything, and sound was about a year and a half. And then
Okay.
then we premiered it this past March.
And
So
when you are in that process, particularly like in the editing and then, post-production process, are you exclusively committed to this film, this role, or are you working on anything else simultaneously? Are you developing other scripts?
Um, definitely not developing scripts at that time, but yes, I my editing work
Yep.
continued throughout all of not the shooting part,
Sure.
of course, but the while I was editing my film, I was also doing other jobs.
Yeah.
And so sort of fun fact, which I can tell you off screen, there's this other weird job I had that's inspired another film I'm writing. So I'll have to tell you about that. I did it for about 3 months. I'll maybe tell you about that off camera because it's a little early days to talk about.
Okay. Well, now I can't wait to hit pause.
Yeah, I'm getting better at doing teasers for things outside.
There you go. There you go. Well, while we're waiting for that experience to reveal itself as a script and then a film, I want to encourage folks to seek out Stationed at Home. As Daniel said, it'll be available on video on demand and cable, and just you know how to do it, people. Talking to your remote control. Say Stationed at Home, beginning on the November the 11th. It's been a pleasure speaking with you about your film.
Thank you, Michael. It's an absolute pleasure. This is an awesome podcast. Thank you.
All right. I wish you all the best with it.